Game of Thrones is a TV series that takes place in what could best be described as fantasy medieval times, and for this video I asked myself, if I had to teach a foreign language to any of the characters of the series, who would do best, who would do worst? My name's Chris, I'm a French teacher at OuiCommunicate, and I want to know who would do well in a French class out of Games of Thrones, and we'll start with the Stark family. When I look at the Starks, they don't really strike me as learners of any kind. They seem to be more about fighting than about thinking as a whole. Let's start with Jon Snow. Jon Snow, definitely not. Definitely not. He doesn't come across as the particularly enlightened type. He's a bit too dogmatic and stubborn to learn a language, I'd say. He doesn't operate in shades of grey or nuance. Wasn't he supposed to kill a prisoner and then his friends walked off in the snow because it took him so long, and the prisoner escaped, which cost him months of trouble, and the lady later had to spell it out for him in bold letters that she fancied him? Jon Snow's just not the perceptive type. I wouldn't bother with Jon Snow. Robb Stark, wow, Robb Stark, hard to say really. He also doesn't come across as particularly perceptive, so I'd say no. He's more of a fighter, he's one-track mind, plus his demise at the Red Wedding proves to me his utter inability to understand people and read the subtext. I mean, Lord Walder Frey was evidently a murdering maniac, and you were ready to marry his daughter. You think he would just forgive you? You know, you thought he would just forgive you for stepping out of it on a whim? Can't you read people, Robb Stark? I think learning a language requires more perception than that. So, no, Robb isn't perceptive. He doesn't read the subtext, and he's just too one-dimensional. Ned Stark, now that's an interesting one. I think Ned has a type of cleverness, but again, he doesn't read the subtext very well either. And he gets killed because he's overly trustful of the system and he misreads the Lannisters altogether. And you need to see the wider picture when you learn a language. You need to understand systems, and I don't think that Ned understands systems very well. He hears words, he sees people, but he doesn't understand systems. And languages are much the same. You have to be a bit more perceptive than that, Ned. So I don't think Ned would do well in a language class, no. Bran Stark, wow, I don't think he'd be much interested at this stage with his third eye thing going on, and learning a new language would be a bit too down to earth for him at this stage, so I wouldn't trouble him with that. It'd be a bit like getting Tom Bombadil interested in cryptocurrency trading. It wouldn't work. Sansa Stark, I think she'd be really capable. I think she's the kind of person to dedicate a year to learning a language so that it can benefit her future projects, her long-term projects. I also think she has a taste for quality versus crap. You know, she can see the difference between the two very well. So she's not the type of person to save pennies and try to pick up a foreign language by talking to the guy who mixes the pig swill or something. She's not that type of person. You definitely wouldn't see her on Duolingo, no way. And she also understands patience and quiet resolve. So I'd say yes. Sansa Stark, yeah. Arya Stark, oh yes, a big yes to Arya Stark. Yeah, for the fact that she's proven that she can completely adapt to a new environment and do it quite well at that. She's not locked into one rigid identity, which is what you need when you learn a language. You need fluidity of thought, a certain elasticity of mind, and the ability to let go of your first language, your first identity, essentially, and adopt a second identity. So as a student, I think that Arya would be my top choice. So to recap the Starks, Arya first, Sansa second, and the others are a bit too one-dimensional, I think, to learn a foreign language. Not the most perceptive of people, I don't think. Let's now talk about the Lannisters. Probably overall more cerebral than the Starks, more calculating, certainly. Let's start with Tywin Lannister. I'd say no. I'd say he wouldn't have the patience. He wouldn't be able to accept coaching of any kind. I think he wants to be in charge too much. He wouldn't be able to admit that he doesn't know something and that a coach or a teacher knows better. He has a complete lack of humility. I wouldn't even start classes with him. He would be a dreadful student. Cercei Lannister, same problem. She wouldn't have the patience. She wants to be in charge too much. Although she did demonstrate the ability to adapt to the ups and downs of life, which also demonstrates a very strong elasticity of thought. But I think she'd have to be in a life or death type of situation, and French would have to be, or any foreign language would have to be a last recourse, and then she'd learn it. But I don't think she'd do it out of interest. But she would do very well. Jaime Lannister. It's really hard to say. He's a sort of nobleman knucklehead, I think. His looks pass him off as a man of refinement, though his actions don't necessarily show that. I think he'd be happier with horses than with books. I don't think he'd have the patience, but he's capable, potentially, like Cercei. Potentially. Really, potentially. Those two, potentially. I wouldn't see him stick with it, so no, I'll say no. Tyrion Lannister, I think he'd do very well, although he does have this immoral side with his prostitutes and drinking that contrasts somewhat with the wholesome and soul-feeding activity of learning a language. So I really don't know. He'd probably miss many classes. He's capable, certainly, but he's also, I think he's very unfocused, and he'd have spurts of learning, and then he would disappear for weeks, and I would fear that it would be very hard to make him stick to a program, but he's capable, definitely. Jofrey Lannister, no way, not even a bit. Too used to getting his own way, not clever enough either. He'd probably throw a fit and get everyone killed if he couldn't remember the whole language after the first class. Too impatient and bossy, zero metacognition or so, which is an important quality in language learning or any type of learning. And plus I seem to remember that he slashed up a valuable book with his sword at his birthday, which also proves he's a knucklehead despite his high birth. No, Joffrey, no way. Daenerys Targaryen, same problem as Jeffrey, too stubborn, too self-entitled, uncoachable, utterly uncoachable. You can't even say good morning to Daenerys Targaryen without offending her. No way, no. Peter Baelish, definitely, he'd learn. He understands subtext, he understands people, he observes, he's naturally good with language. I don't think he'd learn it out of interest though. I think there would have to be a financial or political advantage for him to get into it, but he's capable, definitely. Plus he'd want to do really well at it, because he understands that you can't half-ass things. Pardon my French. Another example of a person you wouldn't find on Duolingo. Peter Baelish, he'd be a good learner, but he'd have to have that incentive. Lord Varis, definitely and without a doubt. He has patience, he has interpersonal intelligence, he has modesty, he understands the long play, do now, benefit later, and he might even learn French for the pleasure. I can see him do that just because he appreciates the intellectual stimulation of French or any foreign language. So yeah, definitely Lord Varis. He's not a man who's caught in instant gratification either. He understands the long play. He has the patience, he has the focus. A very good student, yeah, Lord Varis. Clegane, the Hound, Sandor Clegane. Well, frankly, why not? Why not? I think he's shown he's quite good at adapting to changes of circumstance. He's shown strategy. He's shown adaptability, he reads people quite well, he handles defeat quite well. I think he can get good at whatever he turns his hand to, frankly. The thing that worries me with Clegane is that I feel he'd just be as happy growing potatoes as he would learning a language, or rather just as miserable. Whatever he does, he'd be just as miserable. So motivation might be an issue with Clegane, but potentially capable, yeah. Brienne of Tarth. Definitely. My favourite character, Brienne. I'd say yes, and especially since she has this strong desire to uphold the noble values of chivalry, and you can easily channel this into her French if she's learning French, or rather have a promise to learn French to some noble lady, which would be even better. I think Brienne is respectful of commitment, she's disciplined, she's modest but proud at the same time. What she does very well. I'm sure she'd learn French quite well overall. The thing that worries me with Brienne is that she seemed to function at her best when she serves, than rather out of free will. She does better when she serves, and you can't really ask Brienne, what do you want, Brienne? What do you want to do? I don't think she's too comfortable with this line of thinking. So self-motivation might be an issue with Brienne, but overall I think she'd do well in a French class. And to finish the list, Samwell Tardy. Well, we know that he reads a lot of books, but does he ever do anything with these books? And I fear it might be it might be hard for him to take a step forward, to take a step out of the books and actually dare use French, the French that he learned. So he might get really good at knowing about French, you know, when it started, historically, the link with Latin and all that, but never actually do well at it practically and remain forever a student. You know, I think he lacks that sort of put it in fourth gear attitude. He's a bit overcautious and too respectful of the book for the sake of the book. I think he'd learn well, but on a theoretical level, I don't think he'd do as well as we'd assume, despite his interest in books. So this concludes this video on which Game of Thrones character would be the best language learner, which character would do best in a language class. So from top to bottom, to recap, I have Arya Stark number 1, followed by Lord Varis, Sansa Stark third, Tyrion Lannister, and Brienne of Tarth, if she promises someone else that she'd learn French. And the worst learners, in my opinion, Jofrey and Daenerys Targaryen, tied for worst at the top spot. Number 2, Bran Stark, just because I don't think that ordinary earthly words, I don't think words register with him anymore at this stage, so I don't think Bran would do very well. Number 3, Tywin, too bossy, too proud, wouldn't do well at all. Number 4, Cercei, exactly the same reason, too bossy, too proud. And number 5, Jon Snow, along with all the other brothers really, all the Stark brothers, they sort of share the same quality, the same flaws. They sort of lack that interpersonal subtlety. I hope this video was entertaining, whether you're a fan of Game of Thrones or not. My name's Chris, I'm a French teacher at OuiCommunicate. Thank you very much for watching. See you soon.